Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we are going to take a look at Venus's entrance into Aries as one of a number of major transits that are coming up in the sign of Aries especially from the month of March all the way through May. The month of March is loaded with planetary transits and events taking place in the sign of Aries. So as Venus enters Aries right now, we're going to take a look at all of the Aries transits to come. And I'm going to give you 5 things to start thinking about, 5 themes to watch for, given all of the action in the sign of Aries that is to come. And we'll outline what's happening and when it's happening as well. This will also be the first of a number of videos that we'll do on these topics. So we'll have horoscopes later down the line. Our monthly overview for March, our horoscopes for March, will be covering all of this in depth. We'll have plenty of time to look at all of these events individually and so on and so forth. So today is just a way of sort of briefly going, look over there, look at all of this stuff happening in the sign of Aries. So that is our agenda for today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe. Share your comments and reflections if you have them. We really appreciate it. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. So go over to the website, click on events, go to live talks, and what you're going to see is I have a talk coming up on Venus retrogrades on February 20th. My monthly webinar for February is on the nuances and meaning of the Venus retrograde cycle. We're going to be unpacking the mysteries and magic of those Venus retrogrades. It's a good way to preview Venus's retrograde in March in the sign of Aries, which we're also kind of looking at today too. So check out the other webinars coming up in March and April. Hope to see you there. If you can't attend live when you register, you will get the link for the recording afterward as well. So you can take it on your own time if you can't make the live webinar. Okay, let's take a look at the real-time clock and let's preview all of these transits that are coming. The reason that I chose to do this today is Venus has just entered Aries. Venus went into Aries on the 4th, which is yesterday. Jupiter was also went direct yesterday. I'm going to be doing a separate video on that tomorrow. So we'll be looking at Jupiter's turn direct, and I've got some journaling exercises that I'll give you if you want to track Jupiter's retrograde, and we'll be looking at the topics of the houses that Jupiter's been in and tracing it back to October. So anyway, Venus retrograde in Aries is coming up, and so this kind of it really was, when I was prepping all of my notes for the year ahead a long time ago now, in 2024, I was halfway through the year, I prep for the next year. I start prepping anyhow. So Venus in Aries is one of a number of major planetary events that are all taking place in the sign of Aries. Let's take a look at what happens here. So right now in February, Venus entering Aries is not like it's not like the biggest deal in the world. There's a nice little sextile to Pluto that's coming in the next couple of days. And that little sextile to Pluto is very brief, but everything starts really ramping up in March. So I'm going to take you forward right now to early March. You'll see that on March 2nd, Venus has stationed and the moon is in Aries. And then the next day, Venus turns retrograde and Mercury enters the sign of Aries. And this is where we get the conflagration. So just a big fiery heap. We have Venus turning retrograde in Aries on the 3rd. And then Mercury crosses over the place of Venus. So they conjoin on March 11th. And then just a couple of days later, Mercury stations on the 15th, retrograde by the 16th, around that same 9th, 10th degree that Venus stationed at. And now we have both Venus and Mercury retrograde. Now those two are going to be retrograding back into combustion with the sun, who then enters Aries on the spring equinox. So that's, of course, the fall equinox if you're in the southern hemisphere, but the zodiacal spring equinox when sun is at 0 Aries. So that is now another planet in the sign of Aries. Both of these planets are now retrograde and combust, which ramps up the difficulty, and the process of transformation that they're going through becomes a lot more intense at that point. As if that's not enough, we're coming into a solar eclipse in the sign of Aries on March 29th to follow. So you see how March is just the month of Aries. The very next day, you'll notice that Neptune enters Aries. This is the first time Neptune will be ingressing into the sign of Aries, dipping its toes into the fires and then backing out later in the year. But now we also have Neptune in Aries. So if you count all of that up together, we have Venus retrograde in Aries, Mercury retrograde in Aries, a solar eclipse in Aries. And oh, by the way, that solar eclipse is also happening right on the same degree, within a degree of the same station points of Mercury and Venus's retrograde. And then the day after, again, we have Neptune entering Aries. Now, if we move this forward 2 months to the end of May, then we will have, the chart has shifted a little bit. Here you can see Saturn entering Aries, the sign of its fall. So March is definitely a very fiery Aryan month. And then by the end of May, Saturn joins the party. So quite a powerful lineup. And remember, one of the things that makes this just even a little bit more intense, especially in the month of March, is the fact that Mars, the ruler of all of those planets in Aries, is still in its fall, although direct motion now, which is nice, in Cancer. So the fire and water combination become quite intense. And you could think of it a little bit like boiling water. And so this solar eclipse in Aries, hosted by the fallen Mars, the Neptune entering Aries, hosted by the fallen Mars, the Venus and Mercury retrogrades in Aries, hosted by the fallen Mars. This is going to be a fierce and intense and potentially very emotional month. And so I thought, you know what, with all of that coming up, and again, like I said, we'll have the chance to break down all of these transits individually, but I still think it's good to take some time right now to preview what is likely to happen based on all of these events kind of coming at the same time. So I've got 5 themes to watch for, which is my favorite random number to use for this exercise. Let's start with number 1, which is inceptions. All of these planets in Aries, all of these events in Aries share one thing in common, and it's that they're all taking place in this first sign of spring. And the first sign of zodiacal spring is the sign in which light takes over from darkness within the solar year. So on that half of the solar year, when darkness takes over from light, this sign is, not surprisingly, the domicile of Mars and the exaltation of the sun. 2 planets very much associated with the yang energy, sort of a centrifugal force that moves from the center outward. It's very sort of masculine type of energy, which does not need to be connected to literal sex or gender. And that inceptional quality of Aries, it likes to start things. It's the first sign of zodiacal spring, a sign that is often associated with inceptions, beginnings. And so what do all of these retrograde solar eclipse Neptune into Aries suggest? They suggest a month in which some very new and very powerful new beginnings are at hand. Many of us will experience that relative to the whole sign house of Aries in our birth chart, which is why eventually you will see us doing probably several editions of horoscopes for these transits, for each of them individually even. But the inceptional quality of Aries means that this is a sign that is very pioneering. It is ambitious. It likes to plant seeds and start things. It likes to take decisive actions in new directions. So all of those pioneering inceptional qualities are going to be very amplified during the month of March, and really from March all the way through May, given that eclipses also take a little while to play out and that Saturn's going to enter the party in late May. March is the big fiery month, but a couple months after, we still see a lot of repetitive action in Aries. Venus will come back in direct motion through Aries. Mercury will come back in direct motion through Aries, right? So inceptionality. So what can you expect from these couple of months worth of very intense focus on the sign of Aries? The new beginnings. New beginnings relative to the whole sign house. Start there. That's a really important space. Number 2 would be a change of direction, value, and ambition. Venus is always telling us something as she transits through the zodiac about what she values. As the goddess, we think of Venus in relation to all that we find attractive and beautiful and desirable, or aesthetically pleasing or satisfying. So Venus is very dialed into what we value, what we want, what we desire. And a change of direction for Venus, along with Mercury, can mean a change of direction and value mentally, philosophically, aesthetically, in terms of what we're attracted to and how we're thinking. And these changes or shifts in thought or value can also lead to new ambitions or new directions, which we feel inclined to take action on behalf of. That's the Marsy, fiery quality of Aries infused within 2 retrogrades. So changes of thought, changes of approach, of organization, of strategy, of technology, of mind, of communication, and changes of value, aesthetic, desire, taste, what we find pleasing, and those leading to new or different or redirected ambitions. Our actions will look different because of the changes of mind and value that Mercury and Venus retrogrades imply. Now, number 3 are all of these transits together will also, because they're in a fire sign, because retrogrades can be frustrating and can give us temporary setbacks or something we need to revise or delays. And Neptune can be this very subtle influence that we're not even aware of. It can be it's sort of like Neptune's often associated with things like allergies, like things in the environment that you're sort of very sensitive to. So the high level of sensitivity around 2 retrogrades, a solar eclipse, and Neptune entering Aries can result in the qualities of heat, irritation, inflammation, physically, emotionally, verbally, mentally becoming amplified. Issues with anger, frustration, hostility, conflict, willpower, right? All of those dynamics and how we handle those things. Are we learning something new when it comes to the application of our willpower or how we express or work with anger? Those would be those would be very predictable themes to be working with under all of these transits in Aries. There's obviously an opportunity here to learn a lot about these things and to use these qualities, the quality of heat and anger and will and irritation or inflammation, to learn more about them, to reduce them, to use them more effectively, whatever way you can, whatever way you can imagine that one might interact with this, all of this fire energy. That potential is definitely here now. All right. Number 4 would be significant changes in relationships or social life. The reason I say this is because the Venus retrograde in particular, alongside of Neptune, which is often about things that we are connected to on a more collective dimension. All of the outer planets have a little bit of a collective dimension to them. So you think about Neptune entering Aries, Venus retrograding in Aries, and it is as though there may be some significant changes in relationships or in our social life. Venus is in her detriment in the sign of Aries, which means nothing more than she's in the sign of her planetary opposite, Mars, which means that she has to sort of mediate or deal with martial energy. That gives us something like the feminine warrior archetype or the athletic, like sporty spice, or it gives us tensions in relationships that are rooted in things like conflict, dominance, ego, arrogance, power, pride, the kinds of Mars Sun themes that are unique to Aries. Aries, again, being the exaltation of the sun and the domicile of Mars. So willpower, ego, and sensitivity around those things or issues around those things in relationships can be featured when Venus is retrograde in that sign. And then the connection to different collective currents, new collective initiations or inceptions, and what kinds of social breakdowns or conflicts are occurring in the collective and how are we responding or feeling engaged or not personally could also be a real theme during this time. Number 5 would be amplification of conflict, competition, victory, and what makes us strong or successful. There's a healthy way in which each of us need to feel strong, effective, and like our creative energy means something. It matters to us that we can create something from our heart in the way we live a day or a life. And to be in touch with that creative energy in a way that does not confuse ourselves or our ego for the source of that energy is a big lesson with the sign of Aries. How do we feel strong but not domineering? How do we feel effective and victorious on some level, which makes us feel good about ourselves? It makes us feel like we have creative potency, which is a part of our divine nature. But then on the other hand, how do we make sure that that is not measured solely in terms of how we compare to other people or how much we can compete and win resources over others, or how much we are approved of or liked versus others? The kinds of conflicts that people may want to drag us into while Venus is retrograde in Aries may be wise to avoid. On the other hand, there may be some conflicts we have to figure out how to have in a peaceful manner. This is the tension of Venus retrograde in a Mars ruled sign. Some of these themes would be similar if Venus was in Scorpio. A little different though, but you get the feeling. There are meaningful struggles that we have to go through in relationships that allow us through that struggle, and through working that struggle in a way that is peaceful and thoughtful and sensitive to the other, that allow us to grow as people. So not all conflicts just need to be avoided. I don't think that's actually I don't even think that's what pacifism is really. As you know, someone who values peace, I think of peace as something that often has to be negotiated and worked through tension and dialogue and a degree of conflict. But it's how we approach that conflict. It's how we entertain it. It's how we go about it that allows for us to be seen and heard and valued and loved and respected despite differences, right? So these are the kinds of things that may all become quite strong and noticeable while Venus is retrograde in Aries, along with all these other transits, a Mercury retrograde in Aries. A chance to examine impulses that we have mentally and emotionally. Also, you know, with the solar eclipse in Aries, wow, what a powerful change of life direction with the solar eclipse in the sun's exaltation. A renewed or transformed sense of purpose, ambition, and direction, very much in line with the solar eclipse in Aries. And, you know, what to speak of Neptune entering Aries, which brings us into this very fiery new direction collectively, historically, which, by the way, if you ever want to look, in the shop page, you can see a webinar that I did last year on Neptune into Aries, if you want to get a real deep dive on that topic. I'll be looking at Neptune and Aries in depth, of course, as we get closer to that ingress at the end of March. All right, I'm going to leave it here for today. I wanted to show you, wow, look at this lineup of fire and some initial things to start thinking about. I like to get out in front of these because then as they start rolling through, we're not completely caught off guard. You know, we need a little advanced notice as astrology students, as followers of astrology, to these kinds of major lineups. I think it really helps. So on that note, I hope you're having a great day, and we will see you again tomorrow.